Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of the Bench Mob Ent Podcast, the best sports podcast in New Jersey. For those that are watching, you can see we have a special guest on. For those that are listening, we have a special guest on, none other than Alford Corriette. Now, for those that may not know the name, which if you follow the W, you know the name. Liberty and WNBA contributor for her hoop stats. He has a YouTube channel. Make sure you go subscribe, where he's breaking down some of the best basketball players and women, their highlights, breaking it down, giving information on that. And if you love the W, this is to me one of the aficionados of the WNBA. He's going to talk the CBA, salary, contracts, the Liberty, the parade, anything W. This is the man to follow and tap in with. Alfred, how are you doing today? Thank you for hopping on.
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for that introduction.
Hey, I told you before the show started, you are one of my favorite follows when it comes to the W. For you, where did that love for basketball start?
Yeah, so in terms of just the general love for basketball, I think it started with most people like in school, in middle school. You always play basketball during gym or recess time. And, me growing up, not necessarily the best shooter, but, also wanted to try to improve and just learn more about the game. And that really sparked that intrigue. And then obviously as you grow up, you get into the 2K because I was a 2K kid, just the same. And then in terms of getting into women's basketball, it started years ago, finding it during the summer and then just falling in love with the product, just falling in love with watching games like players like Candace Parker and Diana Taurasi, and just seeing like teams like the Mercury and the Sparks go at it, teams like the Lynx with Maya Moore, and that just can continue to grow and grow.
Yeah, that was the same for me around that same time, seeing the Candace Parkers. I remember Lisa Leslie, but I wasn't old enough. But the Candace Parkers, the Maya Moores of the world, definitely some of the great times, for sure. And a lot of people had that, could understand that storyline too. 2K not being as good, but the ability to still be around the sport that you love is really dope. When it comes to your actual craft and your work, right? Is there ever a situation that you deal with writer's block? And if so, like, how do you combat it?
Oh, I think writer's block is definitely a thing that most people will always deal with, when it comes to covering a team, covering a league, because one, there's so many stories in this league. It's just a matter of trying to formulate, okay, how do you want this story to be told? A lot of times it's really just as soon as you start putting your fingers on the keyboard, then it kind of goes away. But I think the one thing that's always helped with writer's block is understanding that there's always a story to be told. There's always a story to find. It's just a matter of, letting it formulate, see how you can really let it grow, how it can develop. Because a lot of times when you're covering a player or covering a team, it's not always going to happen in one game. You could have like game by game recaps, but if you want to tell a lengthy story, it's going to take some time. So I think it's really just about figuring out how do you want your story to develop.
I think that's important that you mentioned that for those that it's not actually something that just happens in one day, in one game. It takes some time to create some of these storylines, to create some of these articles that are written. When it comes to that for you, like you just mentioned it in regards of it takes some time to actually write these and then have the story develop. For you, what has been kind of like one of the most fulfilling articles that you had to write where it took some time to actually write it, get the information, do the research, and for it to develop?
Yeah, so I think one of the stories that I liked the most was a piece that I did on John Cole Jones, who plays for the Liberty. And obviously, if you know John Cole Jones' story, coming from the Caribbean, growing up in the Bahamas, and then moving to Maryland and DC area, and then obviously like growing in her career, going to George Washington, going to Clemson, but also just how, especially as her as someone of Caribbean descent, how she can come to a place like New York, home of the West Indian Day Parade, and then actually mesh with the community. That was a story that I think took place over, I want to say 2 months, because of just trying to piece by piece things. I think that the first game when she came was actually against Aaliyah Boston, who was also the home game was against Aaliyah Boston, who also is from the Caribbean, from the U.S. Virgin Islands. So I think that was like the first building block of, okay, how can I can tie that into, two Caribbean players, especially with a high profile, playing in the home of the West Indian Parade, and then just seeing how that story can develop throughout the season. And then later on in the season, Jonquil Jones had the ability, or was given the opportunity to be a part of the Empire State Building. They had a lighting for the Bahamian Independence Day, so able to talk to her about that and seeing what she was able to do with that, and I obviously like craft that story over the span of a few months.
That definitely sounds like a fulfilling and great story. And especially I've seen it and heard it and read on multiple places, her story and just how she embraces her culture and also the impact of having a culture and how Brooklyn, that specific area, like you said, it's the home of the West Indian Day Parade, one of the best that I've ever been to. They embrace her in the culture for that. So with you, right, being in the industry, covering stories, covering the WNBA, having a love for the sport, what was something or a couple of things that once you started covering that shocked you or that you didn't know and were surprised once you became in the industry?
Yeah, so I think in terms of something that shocked me was just the level of passion that people have for covering the W, because you always hear of the rumors that people don't want to pay attention to the W, and obviously like there are people that like the W that want to cover it, but seeing just how many more people in the media space that were kind of similar to me that really had a passion for this, have a vested interest in it, and seeing it grow, I think that was the one thing that shocked me, was like, okay, these are people that I can kind of resonate with. We can come together, we can cover this team, we can cover this league, and hopefully make it grow, hopefully let the media aspect of it grow to some regards.
That's a dope thing because like you said, it's this stigma and this rumor and stuff that people don't watch the W. People aren't interested in the W. But even before all of the influx of the numbers and the viewership, people have been watching the W.
Mm-hmm.
People actually are interested in the W. It's been a very good product in regards to the players and the skill for a while now, but it's just now getting the attention of everybody else. For you, looking at how far the game has come on the statistics side, on how it's being covered, what's your thoughts on how it's progressed up until this point?
Oh, I think there's been a huge level of progression. And, in terms of the statistic side, me working with Her Hoop Stats, which is geared towards providing advanced stats and analytics for women's basketball, seeing where it started first in terms of just, your normal kind of box scores, et cetera, and player averages and whatnot, and developing into more advanced stats. And now we've actually have more things on the website now where we can track players' assists, to specific players, things like field goal percentage in the restricted area, other analytics and other stats, seeing that growth as it pertains to women's basketball, because the men's side have had it for quite a long time, but now seeing the women be able to have that same level of coverage, women's basketball have that same level of growth. I think it's phenomenal when you look at things, platforms like Synergy, which is another advanced analytics tool geared towards scouting and breakdowns, seeing the level of data and information that you can pull now from Synergy as regards to the WNBA, the collegiate game overseas. I think that's one thing that you definitely have to remark at. And it's continuing to grow. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but the WNBA specifically introduced Second Spectrum recently.
Mm-hmm.
And Second Spectrum is something that was on the men's side, but now more and more of the GMs now in the W are able to have that information. It hasn't been really released to media or the regular person per se, but the fact that now the teams and organizations also have that advanced analytics, have that advanced data to utilize in their own schemes and their own concepts in terms of how they're game planning for teams, I think that's a great thing to see, and it will just continue to grow and grow. In regards to the media coverage, from a Liberty standpoint, like when I first started covering, you sit in the press conference rooms and it's about maybe 6 to 8 people consistently, like a small bunch. But then as you see that grow from 6 to 8 to, let's say, 10 to 12 to now where you can barely get a seat sometimes in the press conference room because so many people have an interest in covering this team. And it's the same thing with teams across the W where that increased media coverage is continuing to happen. And you look at something like the draft that we recently had, the 2024 WNBA draft. It was one of the first in a long time where fans were able to come to actually see the players get drafted, and that was a sold out house in Brooklyn. And seeing how many fans were so happy to see their favorite collegiate players now have the chance, and international players have the chance to get drafted and so forth. I think just seeing that increased eyes on the game has just been something that is always fantastic, and I think it shows the level of where women's basketball is headed, and it's heading in the right direction. It's continuing to grow and grow.
Most definitely heading in the right direction. And we've talked before the show. I know a couple people that's in that press conference room, and they have shared the same thing of the growth and how now, I don't know, you kind of are a made man, but how some people, it's hard to even get a question off now. Like it used to be easy to get questions off, but it's so many people there now. Everybody's trying to get their questions off. Everybody's trying to ask the coach, Stewie, get their questions off. And I think that's a good thing also because it's like I cover sometimes the Rutgers women's games. It's still at the beginning stages of, like you were saying, the 6 to 8 people consistently. But to have that many people there and to have that many people actually interested in having questions coming prepared just shows the growth that sometimes the fans don't even get to see. They don't get to see the press conference room and how it's literally a competition to try to get your question in, to ask for your specific article, for your newsletter, for whoever you're working for. For you, in that space, though, how do you define success?
Yeah, so I think in terms of success, I define success as my ability to impact people, because I think the mark that you leave on people, whether it's a question, whether it's an article, whether it's a breakdown, whether it's something, leaving a mark on the game that says, like, when you're long gone, like, this is what you did. And if you can impact people and, bring awareness to people on something or make people think about something in a way that they never thought about something before, I think that's how you can define success. It's really just leaving your mark and leaving an impact on people.
Definitely something for those that's watching and listening. That's something to keep in mind of the big picture of what is going to be said about your work. What is going to be said? Does it leave an impact? Does it leave? Because I think the thing that sometimes we as a people have an issue with is finding that balance of, all right, I need to draw attention to what I'm doing for my work, but also it needs to have substance and value.
Exactly.
For you, how do you find like that balance? Because obviously you want to have eyes to be reading what you're writing, but as to your point, you want it to actually impact and touch people. You don't, the goal isn't, oh, let me just have a hot take out there that John Cole Jones is the best person that came from Bahamas ever. Like, no, you want to have substance to it. How do you find that balance though?
Yeah, I think, well, it's like that phrase where it says, let your game do the talking. You have to let your work do the talking, and it has to have some type of substance. It has to have some type of information. I think, especially in this world where it's easy to get into the, clickbaity kind of content where you're really just trying to draw as much eyes as you can and get as much engagement and whatnot, you really have to have a product that makes people really stay. It makes people think, like, okay, no, this is really good content, because there's always a way to differentiate yourself. There's always many things. There's always multiple ways to cover the game, but you also want to find what's unique to you that you feel like you can contribute. But also, it has to have some type of information. It has to have some type of data. It has to have some type of substance, like you're saying. Like with me, like a lot of times I try to do video breakdowns of things because that's something I've noticed you don't really find a lot of in the W or in women's basketball side. It's starting to grow now, but on the men's side, you'll see hundreds of accounts doing their own versions of film breakdowns for a team or whatever. But that's something I've tried to bring to the women's basketball side of things. Covering overseas, that's a market that is now starting to get more and more eyes, but it's still relatively untapped. Bringing engagement to that side of things, looking into the Liberty. Okay, what are players doing specifically? Like, what is the data showing? What are the numbers showing? how are players progressing throughout the season with the New York Liberty. I think things like that are things that I've tried to do, and in terms of bringing substance to the game.
Most definitely, because like you said, it's an untapped area that people aren't really going to your point, Dagny, you could probably walk down the street and find 15 accounts that is breaking down the Chris Paul alley oop to Victor Wembanyama in 14 different ways. But we don't see that as much on the W side as of yet, which goes to your point of leaving an impact. As the game keeps growing, I'm confident when they look back and have the discussion of, oh, the film breakdowns, the analytics, your name is going to come up. Your name is going to come as one of the first people because, like you said, it's untapped and you're actually going into that area and you're having the love and the desire and breaking it down accurately. Like you said, it's not, I'm just breaking this down to try to get clickbaits. No, I'm getting out very valuable information, especially on the overseas front, which a lot of people on stateside don't have access to that knowledge or are not aware of it. And we see it all the time in the draft with the W specifically that, oh, this player was drafted from here, this player was drafted from here. And people at home like, who is this? Who is this player? I've never even heard of her.
I mean, a good example you can think of with the Liberty, Leone Fibic. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they saw New York City, like, who's Leone? Who's Leone? Who's this player? Like, can she really play overseas? Like why is New York bringing her in? And then you really see, like, wait a minute, if you've been following the overseas game, Leone Fibic is a star overseas and can play at the highest level. And you can make a legitimate argument. She was pivotal for New York in that playoff run, just doing so many things. The lights out shooting, her ability to defend, someone that can move and is so agile at 6'4". You know, if you didn't necessarily follow the overseas game, you wouldn't know those things about Leone. But now, and I think more and more people are doing that now, kind of saying, like, okay, can we find the next Leone Fibic? Can we find something like that for our team and so forth? So it's really about, trying to find that untapped market and finding your niche, because it can pay dividends, and it paid dividends for New York.
Huge dividends at the biggest level. Like, she had a good regular season, of course, but the playoffs came. She was heartbreaking to a lot of other teams' fan bases throughout the playoffs. Like you said, 6'4" and so versatile. She created havoc on both ends of the court for any matchup that she saw. Now, she's obviously still on the roster, but the Liberty lost players like Sloot, Thornton. How do you feel they're going to try to replace that? Is it through trades, or they already have it on the roster? What's the approach for the Liberty for the rest of this offseason?
Yeah, so I think the good thing with New York is they're never satisfied with the status quo. They're always looking to see, what can we do to improve what's out there. And until we really get to training camp, I think we still don't have a clear-cut result of it. Are the Liberty done trying to make moves? Because I think, like, one recent move that probably shocked a lot of people was the Isabel Harrison signing, because people thought, oh, okay, especially this kind of late into the game after all of the names have been really dressed, like, okay, the Liberty are still actually pursuing players to bring in. And I think when you look at who the Liberty lost, it's going to be hard to lose someone like the floor general in Courtney Vandersloot, someone who has a wealth of experience in the game, someone who was known as the general, and took a backseat role for Liberty in the playoffs. And obviously he's looking for a better role in Chicago. But I think in terms of the guard play, New York does have players that can come in and contribute. You look at Marine Johannes. New York's going to want to try to bring her back, hopefully. And Marine Johannes is someone that New York Liberty fans love and have been clamoring to return in a long time. When you look at Marine Johannes, the one-legged shooting, the fancy passing, just an ability to be electric when she comes into the game. I think that's something that New York can definitely benefit from having, especially as your primary ball handler, someone to give Sabrina a little bit of a reprieve, so not the burden isn't so much on Sabrina. You still look at they still have Jalen Sherrod, who undrafted player, special story, someone who's had to fight and scrap and claw. But Jalen Sherrod, a 5'7" speedster that can get downhill at what seems like in the blink of an eye, someone that is tenacious on the defensive end, someone that can cause havoc in herself. So I think the Liberty have options at that guard spot where, okay, we lose Courtney Vandersloot, but we still have players. We still have the rights to Ivana Dojkic. someone who's 5'11", 6 foot, a big body that can also shoot, that can also facilitate. Didn't get as much minutes last year, but can still do the things that you may need from a Courtney Vandersloot. In terms of replacing KT now, KT is gonna be a tough one to replace because you talk about the physicality, the hustle, the heart, the grit, someone that really encapsulated what it means to be a New Yorker, and New York fans gravitated to her. But I think when you look at someone like a Kennedy Burke, who's playing fantastic overseas in Turkey, who has also admitted, she said in press conferences numerous times, she wants to be a spark off the bench, whether that's offense or that's defense. This is a chance for her to take even a bigger role with New York and probably try to give some of what you lose with KT. New York is going to want to see what they can get from Rebecca Gardner, who's looking to have a healthy season in a long time. And I think most WNBA fans have to realize when Rebecca Gardner is healthy, you're talking about someone 6'6", is guarding the length of the court. She's going to get in your grill. She's really going to try to make things tough for you, but can still also contribute on the offensive end. So I think the thing with New York is they're always looking to see, like, okay, if we potentially lose someone, who can we have? What assets do we have to leverage into probably trying to replace some of what we're losing? And I think that's the magic of a good front office, of having a good GM in Jonathan Cove, is that they're always looking to try to put the best roster forward.
Hey, at this point, if you had any questions on whether or not you should follow him, I think that right there is enough to be like, let me follow him, because the way he broke that down is absolutely beautiful. To your point, like you said, the Liberty are really primed still to be in that conversation to be championship contenders for a while to come. They are set up nicely. They have options, like you said. Speaking of the Liberty, though, Stewie, Nafisha Collier started Unrivaled. I think it's going great. I think there's a lot of stuff that they're doing on the Unrivaled front that a lot of teams should be taking notes on. Oh, this is how they're doing this. This is how they're marketing. They should be taking notes because they're doing a superb job on all fronts. But one of the players of the Liberty got injured in Unrivaled. Do you think the Liberty and other teams might consider or view differently having their players be a part of Unrivaled League?
Sure. So I think there's always going to be that level of caution that, teams want to exercise because, and it's not just necessarily a Liberty thing, but other teams, because other teams have players that have picked up some injuries in Unrivaled. But switching it back to a Liberty perspective, I think you can't necessarily just hold your breath to that regard, because, you look at someone like Nyara Sabli, for example, who's had injury concerns herself. But, she's played overseas for Fenerbahce, played overseas last year with Praha, and, has been able to contribute. She was big in game 5 of the finals. So, if you're going to be cautious, and she even had a spell where she was injured in the season last year, and then obviously, worked her way back and had that fantastic game 5. But the Liberty also do have a fantastic partnership with HSS, which deals in orthopedic recovery, orthopedic surgery, and orthopedic treatment, especially, and also rheumatological treatment. So they're also, as an organization, looking to see how can we also give our players the best treatment if they do pick up injuries. So I think, like, when you especially think of someone like a Benija Laney Hamilton, who's had problems with knees before, HSS is always there to give her the best treatment, give her the best recovery. Same thing with the Rebecca Gardner. Having her be able to recover in such a fantastic institution, I think that just shows, like with Liberty, we know injuries are going to be a part of the game, but we know that if injuries do arise, we do have the facilities and resources to ensure our players can get back better than ever.
Most definitely. Looking at the entire offseason, I've seen a couple of the tweets of you mentioning all of the movement that happened this offseason. I'm on Threads. Threads was going bananas with every single this signing, this trade. In your opinion, who do you feel actually improved the most? There was a lot of movement. Mm-hmm. Some teams got better in the margin. Some teams got exponentially better. For you, in your opinion, from what you saw so far this offseason, what teams actually improved the most?
Yeah, so I think it's hard to pinpoint it to one particular team because there was just so much movement across the league. But I think some teams that you have to put in that running, Atlanta. When you think of picking up Brittany Griner, that I think it was a shocking move because I don't think anybody expected Brittany Griner to leave Phoenix, but then to go to Atlanta with Alicia Gray, Ryan Howard, Jordan Canada in the crew, that was massive. And then to have players like Bree Jones, a former sixth player of the year, former most improved player, someone who is a solid center in herself, goes to Atlanta. Shatori Walker-Kimbrough. That's a team that's definitely gotten deeper, a team that New York saw in the first round of the playoffs last year. And Atlanta definitely gave them a fight. Even though New York 1-2, those games were definitely tough. So Atlanta is definitely restocked up in that regards. Indiana, when you think of a team that has Caitlin Clark, has Aaliyah Boston, that's like, no. We don't just want to be that young developing team that, okay, 2-3 years down the line, Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston, we can make the playoffs. No, they said we want to make the playoffs now. We brought in DeWanna Bonner, who's a quality veteran, a Hall of Fame caliber player. Natasha Howard, a former defensive player of the year. You bring in Bree Turner, who's known for locking down the interior. Shooters like Sophie Cunningham. And then you also bring in someone who is a champion and knows what it takes to be a champion, like a Sydney Colston. They're like, no, we want vets that are going to come in and make sure that our young players have the tools to compete and be a possible championship contender moving forward. And then I think the other team that's really impressed me is Seattle. When you look at keeping Gabby Williams, who I wanted to see Gabby Williams in a Seafoam jersey this summer, but obviously she'll be staying in Seattle. But, keeping Gabby Williams, you keep Nneka Ogwumike, you're bringing in Alicia Clark, someone who was one of Vegas's key defensive players. You're bringing in a shooter like Alexi Brown. You have size in Lee Yarou. I think that definitely is going to give them some improved pieces for a team that really wants to make a run. They weren't able to make the run that they wanted to because they ran into Vegas in that first round, but now they really have the pieces to really try to see if they can make a big run. So I would say the teams to me that impressed me were Atlanta, Indiana, and Seattle.
Now, one of the teams you just mentioned, the Aces, do you feel they kind of taken a step back with, you mentioned like losing Sydney Colston, Alicia Clark. Like, do you feel they taking a step back with their offseason so far?
I think it's hard to say because, they lost Kelsey Plum, who, a lot of people probably didn't expect Kelsey Plum to leave Las Vegas, Plum Dog, who has been so instrumental for them. But then you pick up someone like Drew Lloyd, who is a quality scorer in her own right, the Gold Mamba. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. And then they've also picked up players like Dana Evans, Cheyenne Parker Tyus. So I don't know if you can say Vegas is taking a step back. And I definitely won't want to bet against Asia Wilson and Chelsea Gray. They're a two-time champion for a reason. And I think they're a team that you always have to have your eyes on. You always have to cross your T's, dot your I's. But I think it's going to be hard. And I think we're going to get a good taste of that for the New York Liberty in the home opener because New York plays Vegas. So we will get to see what that new look Vegas team can do.
So you mentioned Kelsey Plum, which there was little rumors and stuff, but nobody thought that was actually going to happen. That was a homegrown part of the legacy, part of the dynasty that they built in regards of a lot of winning. Maybe not the dynasty and championships, but it was a lot of winning that happened in Vegas with Kelsey, Chelsea Gray, Jackie Young, Asia Wilson, that crew right there. Nobody foresaw really that they was going to break that up. She's with the Sparks, right? So I logged back on Twitter to check some stuff like what you've been talking about, some of the tweets, and one of her new teammates, Kelsey Plum, that is Rickea Jackson. And you made a tweet. Rickea Jackson has the tools to become a future superstar in the WNBA. Can you speak to that, especially being she's teammates with Cameron Brink?
Oh, sure. Rickea Jackson, I think, has the qualities to be a phenomenal player. When you think of someone at her size, at that 6'2", can play the 3, can play the 4, but just has such a fantastic fadeaway at such a young age. That turnaround fadeaway of hers seems like it's money anytime she shoots it. And then she's also someone that can knock down the 3, that can put the ball on the floor, can attack closeouts, that can do so many things offensively. And I think it's no coincidence when you consider that her god sister is Benijah Lady Hamilton, who is someone that has a ton of moves of herself for the New York Liberty. So when you look at a player that just has so much of a polished offensive repertoire at such a young age, and is continuing to get better and better and better. We've seen it in Unrivaled. We've seen like what she can do, winning some games for the Mist and really taking over, playing alongside Breanna Stewart. I think when you look at a player like that just has those tools, is also going to be learning from a champion in Kelsey Plum, and then is also playing in one of the biggest markets in the world, in Hollywood, in LA. I think when you combine all of those factors, that is the tools and that is possibly the atmosphere to become a superstar. And I think Rickea Jackson can be it.
I loved what I've seen from Rickea Jackson, especially that second half of the season where she started getting more consistent minutes and really producing. I'm excited even before Kelsey was sent there through trade to see what they was going to do. Cameron coming back from injury because she had a nice start off to her rookie season as well. Those two together, and now you add Kelsey along with the other pieces like De'Erica Hamby. Like that's a lot of talent in that room, and it's just a matter if they could put it all together to actually be back in the playoffs. The Liberty, rightfully so. If anybody says anything otherwise, I don't know if I could talk basketball with them. The Liberty are the favorite to repeat. Until somebody knocks that crown off, they are the favorite. Until somebody knocks the crown off of Ellie, they the favorite. And by the way, for those that don't know, Ellie is the best mascot in all of sports, not just the W, all of sports. Who do you think is the biggest threat to the Liberty from repeating?
Well, this might be a little bit of a cliche answer, but I think the biggest threat to the Liberty are the Liberty themselves. Because when you're a champion and when you now know what it takes to be a champion and you have all the pieces, you're bringing back basically your entire core. I mean, you're starting core from the playoffs: Sabrina, Leonie, Benijah, Brianna, Jonquel, Niara coming off the bench. You're bringing basically that important squad back. And then once you're just really retooling, refining pieces here or there. But once you know what it takes, the steps, the heartbreak, the pain, this is a team that had championship expectations in year one of when they put together Breanna Stewart and Jonquel Jones. And having that sting of losing in the finals, especially losing on your own home court, and coming back and saying, oh, no, we're not going to do this again. We're not going to let Minnesota beat us in that game 5, and really showing the grit and the toughness. But once you have a championship team, you now know what it takes. And I think New York bringing everyone back, having that information, having new coaches also to help in terms of opening things up. We think of an assistant coach like Sonia Rahman, who has experience with the Grizzlies and has been a fantastic coach. Andrew Wade, who's in Unrivaled, coaching the Laces, having an idea of like how players are doing. I think the Liberty are really the only team that can stop them. And they've said it multiple times in press conferences and interviews. The only team that they feel that can stop them is themselves. And I think once you put those pieces together, and maybe to use an example, when you think of even like a team like Vegas or other teams, they've had to go through their own heartbreaks. They've had to go through their own struggles. They've had to really put it together throughout. And it's not necessarily a one-year thing. It's a process that takes years. When you look at even the Liberty, drafting Sabrina in 2020, then getting Benijah the year after, it's always been building to this. So once you've built to it and now you know what it takes, it's just a matter of continuing at that.
Most definitely, like you said, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process that's building, like you mentioned with the Aces. All the draft picks, Asia, Kelsey, Jack, all of that was building up to what we see now. It takes time to actually do that. And you mentioned like the draft. Last question before we transition to the fourth quarter segment to end off the show. A couple fun questions, get to know you a little bit outside of the sport. But the last question in regards to the draft, who do you see as possibly being the number one pick? It's been conversations. Some say Hannah should be number one. Some say Paige. And is there a world where actually Paige comes back to UConn? There's been talks of Paige coming back because she might not want to be drafted and go to the number one team. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think all indicators seem for Paige to be the number one pick, especially when you think of someone 6 feet tall that can handle, that can shoot, that can do multiple things on the floor, and has come from a reputable program like UConn that's known for developing legendary players. I think your teams are looking at like that that is going to be the player. However, Olivia Miles from Notre Dame has definitely made a case for herself. She, as that point guard, as that lead guard, 5'10", can handle, can pass, great vision, can do things on the defensive end. It's going to be a tight, 1 and 2 leading up to the draft. And I think that's the beauty of the tournament because, March Madness always shows like who is really the top dog in the collegiate ranks. But in terms of Paige going back to UConn, there is a case for and there is a case against. When you look at the case for, one can argue that sure, Paige has the NIL money. But then also for Paige, remember, there's a new CBA that's supposed to be taking place next year. There's a new CBA that may have improved rookie scale contracts next year. So if you're looking from the standpoint of, okay, let's see what amenities and stuff players are going to have following this new CBA, how rookie scale contracts are going to pan out following this new CBA, then sure, okay, Paige may want to say, I'll take another year and then see how it pans out from there. But then the case against is, I think Paige has had enough years of collegiate experience. I think this is going to be a true test for Paige to really show what she can do on the next level. But then also, nothing is guaranteed because you don't know what can happen in your collegiate career next year. You don't know how things can pan out. And, you don't want to necessarily risk something happening that delays or further delays your WNBA career. So I think there's a case for and a case against, but I think it's going to be interesting to see what that final decision is.
Definitely be interested to see that. I think she comes out. You've done everything. There's nothing left for you to do at UConn, Paige. Nothing left for you to do. Come into the league, like you said, and I'll be locked in, paying attention to the CBA and everything that you put out regarding it. Yes, you want to watch that aspect and see if anything is improved once the new CBA is negotiated, and hopefully is actually negotiated this upcoming year, and it's not something that's extended. We heard Angel Reese recently talking about if they don't give us what we want, we're gonna sit out. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping. I do not want to see a lockout on the W. With all of these moves that happen this offseason, I want to see the product and see all of this competition. So hopefully they get it done. But Paige, yes, you need to just come. Just come. Bless the W with your presence. There's nothing left for you at UConn to do. Fourth quarter. Go ahead.
Tie into your point about what Angel Reese said about the CBA. So I think the good thing is we have this year of more games, a 7-game finals, which is going to be interesting. We're gonna have a chance to continue that fanfare. We have a new expansion team, the Golden State Valkyries, that are starting. So this is going to be a great year for the W to really have that liftoff point before going into negotiations and saying, okay, this is what we want. But then what's going to be so interesting about next year? You can say 75 to 80% of the league are going to be free agents. So we're going to have a new CBA where we can have increased money, so many free agents, new team in the Toronto tempo, where like there's just going to be so much uncertainty that I think teams definitely, and players and fans definitely don't want to see a lockout, because we want to see all the chaos. We want to see the free agency spectacle. We want to see everything unfold. So I think getting that CBA done by the end of this season, I think that's what they're going to be pushing for. But on the players' side of things, I can understand that they want the amenities that they rightfully deserve. And I think that even if they, let's say, have a work stoppage, getting them the proper amenities, getting them the proper salaries, getting them the things that will really help them in the long run, I think they definitely want to hammer that point down.
Most definitely. They deserve it. Hopefully it gets it done. And to your point, if y'all thought there was movement this offseason, next offseason, forget it. It's keep your phone on, notifications on. I don't care if you're at work. You're going to want to know what's going on. It's going to be crazy busy offseason next season. Fourth quarter segment. I'll start off with this one. Who are you outside of your work? Who's Alfred outside of your work?
I'm just a normal person, love exercise, love lifting, and just getting stronger. Always watching basketball, whether it's the the overseas game. Haven't watched the NBA as much, but I think there's just so much great product on the women's side of things that I don't foresee myself probably watching the NBA anytime soon. But yeah, definitely lifting, watching basketball, big on TV series, big on historical documentaries. So probably not the most exciting, but I think that's just me. I'm just a laid back person.
Nah, that's cool right there. Love of the game. You watching the game, and like you said, that's a lot to consume anyway. It's only 24 hours in a day. So if you're watching the W overseas, you creating the content for it, it's not much time to be watching a lot of the NBA games. And I'm a movie person myself. I literally just telling my wife, I love the documentaries. I love TV series. So there's nothing wrong with that. For you, like you mentioned that. What's some of your like favorite TV series or what some that you watching right now?
Yeah, so I know there's the popular one that everyone's talking about, Paradise. I started trying to get onto that one. Recently watched another good kind of political thriller, Zero Day with Robert De Niro. That's on Netflix.
Sir.
Um, Recently watched the movie. It came out a few years back, but I thought it was a good movie, Black Hawk Down, on Netflix. So yeah, I think in terms of reruns that I'm watching, Love a Different World with Jasmine Guy, Dean Hardison, you got to watch that one.
For sure.
So I'm definitely always trying to find stuff that's also fun, but then also stuff that's serious.
I'm the same way. I like to have a little bit of the comedy, but I realized probably over like the last year, I'm more into the serious suspense type of mystery, crime, to any of that. I'm locked in, and hopefully you share with us on Instagram and Twitter your thoughts on Paradise, because I think it's one of the best shows so far in this early year. Sterling killed his role. So definitely be intrigued to see what your thoughts on it. What has been your favorite moment covering women's basketball so far?
Yeah, so I think I have two, and both of them have come from covering Liberty. I think the one that I will never forget, obviously, being in that arena for Game 5, watching the Liberty win their first ever championship, but also bring New York its first basketball championship in over 50 years. New York has always had that stigma of, oh, you can't win a championship in New York. Oh, a championship is never going to come to New York. The Knicks have failed. The Nets have failed. But also seeing it be the Liberty, be the ones to say, no, we're going to bring that title home to New York, I think is special. And then obviously seeing the parade that happened later on in the week, seeing how many people came out, seeing the ticker tape, the confetti, and then also that after celebration at Barclays, seeing the players just excited, just gone for the day. They just laid back as you can ever be. Seeing Coach Brondello dance on the stage and we seeing the fans dance and enjoy Remy Ma and Fat Joe, and really showing that, okay, now New York are the basketball champions. I think that was pretty cool. And I think the second one for me was also being able to collaborate with the Liberty on one of the Liberty Unlocked series. So that if you're not familiar with Liberty Unlocked, it's kind of like a in-access documentary series where you get to see things from the Liberty perspective, seeing things in the locker room, seeing things from that perspective, and it's well shot. It's cinematic and whatnot. But being able to collaborate in one of the episodes, talking about the bench, talking about players like Leone and Katie and Yara, I think that's a moment I will never forget. And being able to collaborate with the champions, I think that's something that's immensely special for me.
Yeah, that's definitely huge. Couple more questions. Again, we thank you for taking time out your schedule. I love food. I love to eat. Every single guest I ask a food related question. Always also just to see what they say. And if I'm in that area where they at, I have a note section in my phone of places to go. Oh, Minnesota. You said it was a good spot in Minnesota. All right, let me write this down. There's a good spot over here in Maine. Let me write this down. For you, favorite place to eat at in Brooklyn?
My favorite place to eat at in Brooklyn is an Italian spot called Centani. It's in the Flatbush area. You can take the 5 train to Franklin, a few blocks walk, and then you're right there. It's a bit of a smaller building, but I mean, the food is great. I mean, growing up in Brooklyn, going to school in an Italian neighborhood in Bay Ridge, you really become accustomed to the Italian food, and you definitely love the Italian food, the calamari, the pasta, everything. So I think Centani is one of my favorite places in Brooklyn to eat.
to my point, I'm gonna have to write that down. Once we done, I'm gonna have to put that in the list of spots to go to. I love me some Italian food. Last question before we get you out of here. Being that you cover basketball, you cover the women's sport. If you could choose any event in history to cover, any sporting event to cover, what would that sporting event be?
Oh, it has to be the Olympics. I mean, just an event where you have the best of the best athletes from around the world in one area. They're congregating, but they're also competing at the highest level. I would love to be around that. And especially when you look at this past Olympics in France, just to see the fanfare in that arena. If there was ever one event that I would love to cover, it's that USA versus France game between Asia Wilson and Stewie versus Gabby Williams and Badian and Rupert and Salon and that group. Just seeing that game and how France took the USA to its ultimate limits, and then seeing that ruckus French crowd burst with every shot. It's seeing that every shot that went in for the French national team, that arena was just berserk. And then you really just see the pride that countries have in their teams, especially during the Olympics. If there's any event that I would love to cover, it's to be there for that.
That was absolutely a bananas time for the fact that USA pulled it out and to be in that arena. And like you said, that was an away game. That really wasn't an away game 1,000%. So for them to able to get it done in that time was absolutely crazy and great on their part. To be in that atmosphere, to cover that, to be able to ask questions, that would have been extremely dope. But again, we thank you for hopping on, taking time out your schedule. Y'all know the vibes here on the Bench Mob Entertainment Podcast. If you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. Bench Mob, we out. Peace.